Is karma mentioned anywhere in the Bible? Well, we'll consider that as we jump into John chapter 9. And the main plot line of John chapter 9 is another sign in the life and the ministry of Jesus. At the beginning of John 9, Jesus makes a statement. He says, "I am the light of the world." And the rest of the story of John 9 is the unpacking of that statement. They meet a man who is born blind, and Jesus miraculously heals him. And as he regains his sight, the Pharisees are really in uproar, and they're all turbulent, and they're trying to figure out what just happened, who did this, how did he do it, and they question the guy, they cross-examine him, they bring his parents in, they question him, they cross-examine the guy again. And so John 9 is really this long unpacking of this drama. The punchline of the whole thing would be that Jesus brings light, and he brings sight to the blind. And the main idea being not only that he brings physical sight to this man who's blind, but he's symbolic of bringing spiritual sight to those who are blind, bringing people from darkness into light, from blindness into seeing. And the irony being that the ones who should probably be seeing, the Pharisees who spend most of their time around the law and the temple and the thinking towards God, they're the ones who are totally blind. They don't see the work of God right in front of them. They don't see God the Son right in front of them. And so there's this sense of judgment and grace in the same passage. Jesus being the light of the world, that's really the main theme of the narrative of John chapter 9. But there's this subplot that I think is really interesting to explore for a moment, and that is that the disciples seem to have a really first century Hebrew influenced primitive form of karma. Their worldview involved something of karma, because when they meet this man who is blind, the first thing that they do is they ask Jesus a question, and they say, "Who sinned? Was it this guy's sin that caused him to be blind, or was it his parents' sin that caused him to be blind?" And Jesus pushes back on that worldview and says, no, that's not how this works. Neither of those things are true. This is simply a venue for the work of God. This is a place where God's grace, where God's kindness can be displayed. So how did they get to think that this guy's condition was a result of his sin or his parents' sin? And later on, the Pharisees even reinforce this view, this idea of karma, by saying to the guy, "You were born into utter sin anyway," inferring you were totally blind because you were a sinner at birth, and that's your condition, and that's your just deserts. So the idea of karma is that somehow if we do something bad, then the universe will make sure that something bad happens to us, and if we do something good, then the universe will make sure that something good happens to us. And the whole point of karma is that eventually the scales are balanced, that all good things come around to those who are good, and all bad things come around to those who are bad, and the scales are the main symbolic piece of that understanding. But Jesus pushes against that and says, no, that's not how this works. And so he introduces something better than, and in a way more sophisticated than karma. He introduces grace, doesn't he? And grace is actually the reality that the scales are unbalanced, that we might walk way far away from God, we might indulge in all kinds of craziness, but somehow upon humility and repentance and faith and a turning toward God, there is this totally disproportionate kindness that we receive, this lavish goodness and love that is poured out towards us. And it's not about scales being balanced, it's about the character of God being known and being manifest within his creation. And so Jesus moves us from the old covenant karmic way of thinking about the law to the new covenant realms of grace, grace upon grace, in which the scales are really disregarded completely, and it is now more about the intention and the determination of God to prove his love and grace and kindness and loyalty towards creation in every way that he can, primarily through God the Son, who comes to us as light. So, beautiful text there from John chapter 9, and I want to take us a little bit further into the conversation about karma in our next video, and so we'll explore that a little bit more together. Until then, peace.